Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for the third episode of Sleepin' with Steve, the podcast that is designed to help you fall asleep and stay asleep while I tell you facts and stories of historical events and occurrences in this tone in order to help you drift off to a more relaxed state and a more knowledgeable state, particularly in the subject of history. So today, or rather tonight, I guess you guys don't really know when I'm recording these, so that's pretty good. But at this time, I will be speaking about the Jonestown Massacre. And we'll get into more about what actually went down at Jonestown. But it's a very interesting piece of history and a really messed up event that happened in over the course of a couple decades, culminating in 1978. But this is a very influential and very, very, I know I said messed up a couple times already, screwed up event where a lot of people died and history was changed forever. You can see tie-ins from the Waco episode, which I believe was the first episode. Let me just fact check that. It was the first episode, Waco. There were concerns that David Koresh, if you remember, the leader of the whole standoff there at Waco, the officials were afraid that it could turn into something like what happened at Jonestown. And what happened at Jonestown, you might be asking yourself right now? Well, buckle your seatbelts, because you're in for a wild ride. And you know what? It's good. I'll be your driver. I'll be, not Alexa, what do you call? I'll be your Siri, your Garmin. I'll guide the drive. So you don't have to do the research that I have to do. You guys have the luxury of making me do all the extremely difficult internet searches to find out what really happened at Jonestown. And you know what? I'm thrilled to be here once again, and I'm happy you guys are here again listening. This is really important to me. Not only because I really, really enjoy history, and I think that history is a topic that should get more shine, as they say. I think that history repeats itself, and we can learn a lot of valuable lessons about what happened in the past to sort of help us figure out what to do and what might happen in the future. Another reason that I did this podcast, or chose to present it in this way with this buttery, very smooth delivery here, is because a lot of people think that history can tend to be boring, especially, we've all had those days back in high school or middle school, even college, where you go to class and they're talking, whoa, I just ate, I had a whole bunch of ice cream, so if you hear my stomach, I apologize. It's rebelling a bit. Too much ice cream. Well, back to history, you sometimes, when you hear people speak about histories, you get a little doze off sesh, little sleepies in your eyes. Mr. Sandman, the sandbag man, comes and rubs his sandy fingers in your eyes, and you start to feel a little bit sleepy. So that's why I am doing this podcast, so I can help you, the listener, fall asleep. And at the same time, I can maybe help you, maybe learn you about an event, just things in history that were significant that you may have forgotten about, or maybe you never knew them at all. Maybe you knew a lot about them and you just came because the algorithm sent you here and now you're listening to me. Hi there. So, this show, it's kind of important to me because I myself have trouble sleeping, oftentimes without having a sort of auditory aid, whether that be white noise or me listening to the TV or just, throwing on a podcast like this. It really helps me. I don't know about you guys, but falling asleep is hard. So, I'm trying to make it more accessible for you, and I just want it to be easier, like a one-sided conversation. Now, there's no pressure for you guys to fall asleep. This is, it's more so you just listening to me kind of ramble on, go on some tangents here and there. But I'll give you, don't worry, I'll give you the rundown on what really occurred in the events surrounding and leading up to Jonestown. But yeah, it's a really big watershed moment in history, and I'm just happy to be here. After that deep breath, I'd just like to tell you guys that you don't have to be in bed right now. You could be doing. Actually, let me get into that a little bit later. First, let me just say that you guys. Let me just give you a little bit of background on the podcast. If this is your first time listening, I should have done this a little earlier, but here we are. I record these in one take, so if you hear me kind of like struggling for air or something, your throat gets a little dry when you talk. It's like a filibuster. But the structure of this show, so I guess I already went through the intros, but the structure goes, there's a intro and typically a section where I just kind of talk about nothing, and it kind of sets the tone for the show, and it allows you guys a chance to get ready for bed if you so choose, whether that means you are, just brushing your teeth, or making your midnight snack before you hop in bed. Maybe you're drinking some warm milk instead of eating a gallon of ice cream like me. but you don't even have to be you don't need to be getting ready for bed for this podcast to be for you. It's really meant for anyone. If you just would like some time to relax, or if even if you are, exercising, or you just want to learn a little bit more about history, or maybe you just like me, and that's why you're tuning in. You know that, yeah, it would be nice for Steve to get his views up, and I appreciate you. You know who you are, all you thousands of people out there. So yeah, that's the. Oh, and then I almost forgot the most important part, which is the part where I actually tell you the story of the topic at hand. And tonight, that is going to be Jonestown. Now, I typically don't get into the story, the main meat, the bread, the beef and potatoes, if you will, until about 10 or 15 or 20 minutes in. And I guess I kind of started a little bit later today, so maybe if you skip to like 18 minutes or so, it should be getting into the story. These shows typically last around, I shoot for between 45 minutes to an hour. I think that gives sufficient time for you as the listener to, maybe listen on your lunch break, or give you a little bit of time to sleep or get ready for making your nest that you're gonna lay in. And I'm just happy you guys are here. And excuse me, it's just ice cream, but I just want you to have the opportunity to learn with me and, kind of expand your knowledge. And even if it doesn't, I hope you had a good time, or you enjoyed the content. So if you haven't been aware by now, I am going to be speaking like this and, doing my meanderings. I can understand how this would be a frustrating podcast for some of you to listen to, but hang in there. I do it for all you guys. I know quarantine right now. I'm recording this in April of 2020, so. I mean, obviously you'd see it on the stamp, but yeah, it's a really crazy time, and I've been I've been having a little bit more trouble sleeping now with everything that's going on in the world. And I've found that some of my friends and various colleagues, yes, and the sort, they all kind of feel the same way, and that makes these shows a little bit more special, if you ask me, because I really want you guys to have a chance to, really enjoy your bedtime without having to really, stay up all night tossing and turning, looking up at the ceiling, wondering what's going to happen. I'd just like to take these 45 to 60 minutes to allow you to take your mind to a different place. Just focus on me and the story that we're going to be telling today. And I think I said it before, but there is absolutely no pressure and no rush for you guys to actually fall asleep. It might take more than one episode, depending if you're like me, where it takes me like at least an hour to fall asleep. So, I'm gonna be here. Don't worry about that. I'm here for the conversation, and all you gotta worry about is your breathing, and making sure that you're comfortable. I'm gonna be here to keep you company. If you get scared in the night or something, maybe throw on the autoplay to the playlist, and I'll be with you for currently, 3 hours, give or take. But if it was up to me, it would be longer than that. It's just the content right now. This would put me at about 3 hours. So, there's more coming. Don't worry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I can assure you. The fact that I just want you to know that I am currently, well, you know what, I guess I could tell you this. You guys are so important to me that I am actually not watching the Michael Jordan documentary live right now. I know. Crucify him, heretic. Who said that? Somebody get him out of here. Thank you. It's a pleasure of mine to do this for you guys, and it's kind of therapeutic for me to research these stories and events, and give them back to the YouTube and SoundCloud currently community. So, if you guys are watching the Michael Jordan documentary right now, with your headphones in, first thing I'd like to say is that's kind of crazy. I wouldn't necessarily listen to this over some MJ highlights. I'd probably throw on some Freddie Gibbs or something. Get the juices flowing, pumped up. And maybe I've been listening. I've been watching the Jersey Shore actually recently, and kind of trying to go through the whole series, and I'm currently about halfway through the first season, and I must say I think some of those Guidos and Guidettes, I believe they call themselves, they could use a good relaxing night's sleep most of the time. But that train seems to have sailed. So it looks like it's about time to get into it. So we're gonna get into it, ladies and gentlemen. Slurp, slurp. All right. So the Jonestown Massacre is what we'll call this today, and basically I'm gonna skip the who, what, when, where, and why, because we're so far into this right now. But actually, I guess I could just do it to you in sentence form without chopping it up. I have the hiccups right now. This is gonna be rough. The Jonestown Massacre was an event that occurred on November 18th, 1978. So what happened here was hundreds of members of this cult that consisted of many American citizens and several other South American peoples who were in a cult that was called the People's Temple, not the Hidden Temple, the People's Temple. And basically, what happened was this guy Jim Jones, the leader of their cult of the People's Temple, ordered this mass suicide, mass murder, depending on what you think of what happened that day. But basically, hundreds of people died by drinking. Actually, I guess we'll get into that a little bit later. I'm not going to spoil it. Well, you know what? I'll just give it, since I gave you a taste. You know how whenever somebody is falling for something stupid, or not even a great example, if you have ever met somebody who was, I guess, subscribing to a belief that you thought was crazy, and you heard someone else say that they're drinking the Kool-Aid, that phrase comes from this event. That'll come back into play later. So basically, before 9/11, this tragedy that occurred here at Jonestown was the single largest loss of civilian lives for the United States in an event that wasn't a natural disaster. So no hurricanes, no tornadoes, or tsunamis at all. This was basically not a terrorist attack, I guess, per se, but more so a crazy megalomaniac, just a wild man, crazy person, Jim Jones, and all of his, well, I guess not all of them, many of his believers and cult members, they all perished. So let me give you a little bit on Jim Jones. So Jim Jones was born on May 31st in 1931 in Indiana, and by the early 1950s, he began working as a self-ordained Christian minister. And what he would do is he would go around and preach at these small churches near in Indiana. Then he started to make his way into the bigger market, so he would go around near Indianapolis. And this guy was very charismatic. Let me paint the picture for you. He actually looked a lot like Elvis, but not like in a... You know how Elvis was like a good-looking, swaggy dude? The King. They called him... Well, Jim Jones was basically like the Kmart ripoff of Elvis, and that's how I would describe how he looked. And he always wore these dark aviators, so you knew he was a real cool character. As Carol Baskin would say, he was a cool cat. Maybe a kitten. But, maybe a black cat. Because he brings some bad luck around later in the story. You don't want to see those black shades walking towards you. So, anyways, like Elvis, he was a charismatic fellow, and he would do some kind of wild things to raise money. And one of the things that I heard that he did was he would go around door to door trying to sell live monkeys to people. Now, I personally don't like monkeys. I think they're kind of weird and crawling around. I'd rather get it. I mean, I've read the stories of the people who get attacked by monkeys, and I'd rather get mauled by a bear or eaten by a shark than attacked by like a chimpanzee. But that's neither here nor there. If you'd rather get attacked by a monkey, leave that in the comments. I'd love to hear your reasoning why. So, Jim Jones. Back to old Jimmy. So, he ended up moving out to California sorry about that. So Jim Jones opened up the first People's Temple Church in the city of Indianapolis in the 1950s. And the thing that was interesting about Jim was he had a racially integrated church. And, that was pretty unusual at the time, considering that it was in the 1950s. And, so he had a lot of support from minorities and people who were trying to integrate society, which is a great thing. It goes without saying, but so by the mid-1960s, Jim Jones moved his congregation to the northern part of California. And by the 1970s, he relocated and went back to San Francisco. And also, he opened up a temple in Los Angeles. So, Jim was moving on to bigger and brighter stages. So, by the time he was in San Francisco in the 1970s, Jim Jones became a pretty powerful guy. A lot of elected officials, public officials, and the media, they liked him because he donated a lot of money and to charities and would help. I actually don't know about that, but he would help different politicians whenever it came towards election time. So the people of California really began to like Jim. And another reason why they did was because obviously his racially integrated congregations, and his family was actually what they call like a rainbow family. So that means that it was very, very representative of the different races and just ethnicities. So it wasn't a very vanilla, for lack of better words, family. They kind of were looked at as a symbol of inclusion and love between races at a time where minorities and white people weren't on the best terms. So Jim was somebody who a lot of people got behind, and they really liked his message. So also along with that, the People's Temple would run social and medical programs for the less fortunate. And so things like food kitchens, like dining halls or soup kitchens, and like rehab for drugs. And they would help people out with their legal aid. So they actually were like, it doesn't sound like this. Hey, Steve, this Jim doesn't sound like that bad of a guy. Well, it sounds like that to me too. But I guess we'll have to stick around and listen to the whole story. So basically, his messages on, social equality and justice, racial justice, attracted a very diverse group of followers. Many of them young people who wanted to make a change and wanted to make things better for their fellow man and woman. But yeah, so as his amount of followers or his congregation size grew, which, by the way, they said there was in 1977, it was reported that it was up to 20,000 people were in his control, I guess. There were a lot of people, but also a bunch of negative reports came out that kind of detailed what was kind of occurring in his congregation, or some of the shady things that Jim was doing, and these included, some of the people who got out, the former members, would say that, if you join, you might force you to give up all your belongings, maybe even your house, and in some cases, some people gave the custody of their children up, which, it was kind of similar to the Waco once again with David Koresh. So they also talked about how they would get beaten, or, some of the things that Jim would do would stage healings, like for cancer. And that sounds crazy, but it's not funny, but I've seen pastors today, I guess not even pastors, I guess televangelists that sell miracle cures for the coronavirus, and they pray the cancer away through the phone. It's like that type of thing where it's kind of just crackpot. They're like, this guy's insane. But, the people who were indoctrinated into this, they saw past that because he was so inclusive and fought for the, racial justice, which, he did a lot of good things, but then he eventually turned out to be a real rotten apple, if you ask me. And so, because of all these reports that were shining a kind of poor light on him in the People's Temple, and some of the investigations that were seemingly mounting, Jim Jones became became a little bit more paranoid, and so he would wear his aviators a lot more often, and he would travel around with armed bodyguards because he was a powerful man with some money in his pocket. But hold up, because he invited his congregation to move with him to Guyana, which is a country in South America that became absorbed by Venezuela later, but it is kind of northeast South America, very dense jungles, It's tropical country. So he promised to build up a socialist utopia for himself and his followers. And I just like to say, disclaimer, there's nothing wrong with wanting to build a socialist utopia, but, don't follow Jim Jones to Guyana for that. It doesn't end well, hence the massacre in the title. But, so in 1974, a group of Jones's followers went to Guyana and they established a agricultural kind of commune in an area of the jungle. And, by 1977, Jones and more than 1,000 of the temple members joined them and moved there. So 1974, a small group goes over and starts, building up the land for the agricultural utopia. And then by 1977, Jones and over 1,000 people go back. There we go. So Jonestown didn't really turn out to be the socialist utopia that Jim had promised. In fact, it was almost, it was a bit of a labor camp, I guess you could call it. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, I was falling asleep there. So the members that moved there had to work all day in the fields, and they basically had to be Jim's slaves to an extent, working the land and, making sure that Jim was happy. And if Jim didn't like the people or if they questioned his authority, there were some harsh punishments like the beatings, and there were armed guards that would watch them and patrol the compound. So it wasn't a good situation. All these people got their passports and medication confiscated when they got there, which is not a good sign. And they got, absolutely destroyed by mosquitoes and some of the tropical diseases down there, as you would expect. But they were all in it for the long haul now. And old Jimbo had created a kind of social hierarchy, I guess, where the people's temple members were encouraged to snitch on each other. And if they did things wrong or talked some ish on Jim. And so they were forced to attend these long meetings in the middle of the night. And their phone calls and their letters got censored by Jim. So it was pretty much pure hell on earth. Not so much socialist utopia, but, green hell. And, by this time, Jim Jones's mental health was dwindling, and he was pretty addicted to drugs. My man would inject Quaaludes, and Quaaludes, that's a funny scene from Wolf of Wall Street. I was sleeping with Steve Madden. But back to Jonestown. So he would do Quaaludes and barbiturates and, just all types of crazy, not fun drugs. And so basically, he had his own throne created in the compound, and he told people that he was basically in the same vein as Vladimir Lenin, the orchestrator of the Russian Revolution, and Jesus Christ, the orchestrator of the the Son of God, Jesus Christ. So he was convinced that the media and the government were out to, destroy him and everything that he had created. So he would require these People's Temple members to participate in these practice suicide drills, like whenever he wanted, and it was just absolutely surreal. I mean, imagine if somebody said, "Hey, we're gonna practice our suicide drill today," and you'd say, "Okay, well, where's the line? Where am I gonna run to? Run back? You blow the whistle?" And they say, "No, no, 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 no. Like, not that kind of suicide, boy. Suicide, like you." Excuse me. This is suicide on my vocal cords right now. That was inappropriate. I apologize. But so at the time, the U.S. government was getting a little concerned, and this representative from California, Leo Ryan, had heard some news that some of his constituents and their family members were basically being held hostage. Held hostage against their will in Jonestown. And so he and a party went down and decided to investigate the situation. So Leo Ryan arrived in Guyana in November of 1978 with a group that included some news reporters, photographers, and some of the relatives of the People's Temple members. So on November 17th, the congressmen and the reporters were welcomed to the Jonestown compound, surprisingly, and they had dinner and a nice evening of entertainment. So Jim Jones even agreed to meet with the reporters, and during the visit, some of the members of his cult had asked Leo Ryan's group to help, take me with you, get me out of here. This guy's freaking crazy. You gotta help me. And so the next day, Ryan and the rest of his group were, joined by a small group of the People's Temple members who decided to defect and leave Jonestown. They left. And so when they were waiting at an airstrip not too far away from Jonestown, they were ambushed by men with guns. And so Leo Ryan was shot and killed, along with another reporter and a NBC cameraman, and also a photographer from the San Francisco Examiner, and a woman who was a member of the People's Temple who tried to leave. They had all died. And the ambush was ordered by Jim Jones because he couldn't have anyone leave and expose his story. So actually, there's a great, there's footage of this ambush, and it was pretty cool to watch. I mean, I didn't see everything happen, obviously, and it's not cool that the people died, but it was very interesting to see that they had this on video. And I could be fudging up the facts here, but one of the reporters, I forget her name, but woman who was a reporter got shot and survived, and basically ended up becoming a congresswoman, I believe, or maybe a U.S. representative later. But it was just a crazy story. So the same day as the murders at the airstrip, um, Jim Jones told his followers that a bunch of soldiers were going to come, the government was coming to torture them and take everything. And he basically gathered everybody into his main pavilion and said, "We are going to commit what he called a revolutionary act." And so what happened here was they were going to commit this mass suicide. And so the youngest members of the People's Temple were the first ones to die. So they would have parents and nurses and other members fill up syringes with cyanide and some sedatives and also, powdered fruit juice like Kool-Aid. Although I'm not sure if it was Kool-Aid or not, but either way, they would shoot the poison concoction down the children's throats. And the reason that they had so much cyanide was Jim Jones had gotten a license to be a jeweler at some point in his life, and I'm not sure why jewelers need cyanide exactly, but so he was able to stockpile a ton of it. And I don't know if you guys know anything about cyanide, but that stuff is super toxic. Very commonly used for these suicides. Like soldiers used to have these pills. Not soldiers, but like secret agents, like I guess KGB, CIA, tablets. If you get compromised, chew this. Cyanide comes out and it kills you. But so the adults then filled up their drinks with this concoction. They lined up, and there were armed guards surrounding the whole pavilion. And like I said, this is where the drinking the Kool-Aid term comes from. So, basically, when the officials, the Guyanese government officials came to Jonestown the next day, they found hundreds of bodies. They were all dead. Many of them were holding on to each other, their loved ones. Most of them were all in the same type of position, except for Jim Jones, who shot himself in the head with a single bullet wound. And the total death toll of this was 909 people, and about a third of those were children. So, some people actually managed to escape into the jungle, but, they had to get past the guards with the guns and the crossbows who were ordered to kill anybody who left. So it was a real hell house, honestly, in there. Several of the Jones family members, including some of his sons, were actually in a different part of the country at the time. So them, along with those who escaped, there were about 33 of them who survived. It's really a tale of how a person can change and just how dangerous some of these cults are. And if you get too deep into them, it gets very, very sketchy, very fast. And then another little interesting thing here was there was a recording of that event, and they call it the death tape. And this death tape basically helped the investigators figure out what happened. There were also many other recordings, over 1,000 of them, that were propaganda or sermons that just basically, painted the picture of what really happened there. And I'm not sure if I'm going to link it. I don't think I will, because I don't think it's in great taste. But I actually listened to the death tape. And basically it is 45 minutes long. You can find it on YouTube. Just search Jonestown death tape. But it's not for the faint of heart. If you don't like being spooked or creeped out, I definitely wouldn't listen to it. But I'm pretty good with those types of things, so I gave it a listen. And basically, you hear a bunch of people in the background, and Jim Jones is speaking, and he sounds very disjointed, and just he doesn't sound right in the head. And I think you can attribute that to all the drugs and the paranoia of what was going on. His mental stability was slipping pretty quickly, and basically, he initiates their revolutionary act, and while he's talking, you start to hear less and less people in the background, and by the end of it, the last words, I believe, that you can hear him say are, quote, "This is not suicide. This is revolutionary suicide from an inhumane world." And then you hear his final breaths. And it's pretty chilling. It really is. But just because you really, reading about it is pretty crazy. But then once you actually hear it, like, that's a real recording from the event. It's kind of, it's pretty chilling. So if you guys want some context on that, you can look it up yourselves. I'm not going to link it. But yeah, that kind of sums up the Jonestown Massacre. And I hope I know my voice has changed over the course of this, but I hope you guys really enjoyed it. It was a really messed up story, I know. I hope you don't get any bad thoughts, but I really had a good time talking to you guys about it. And, I will, you can look through this one and the Waco episode and find some similarities. So now you have a little bit of context on the Waco. Like if you go back and listen to that, I talked about Jonestown a little bit. So hopefully this filled in the gaps, and you guys got a better understanding of what happened, or what drinking the Kool-Aid comes from. And yeah, I hope you had a good time listening, but I truly hope that you're asleep right now and you don't even hear this. But yeah, I just thanks for tuning in again. I'll be back again later this week to talk about, I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about actually. So if you guys have any recommendations, leave them in the comments below. Drop it a like, and, subscribe to me for notifications on when I drop new stuff. Typically it's Sunday nights and Wednesday nights. You can also listen to me on SoundCloud at Sleepin' with Steve. So that about does it for tonight, guys. And, thanks again, and I'll see you next time.